who is Miss Wakani Hoffman. She'll be speaking to us today on the right to relate, Ubuntu philosophy of relationality between natural human intelligence and artificial intelligence. Please, Wakani, we are happy to have you speak to us.
Thank you very much, Mara. I will share my screen as well. You can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, and good morning, everyone. I will actually be building from Dr. Fayemi's presentation. Somewhat it is related to what I want to speak about, but I'm not an expert on biotechnology. I'm an expert on intercultural relations, intelligence, and African oral storytelling and wisdom keeping. I run a project called the African Folktales Project that provides an African education curriculum using folktales, proverbs, and wisdom tales to teachers across the continent on a platform called the Ubuntu Education Hub. So this project is about reinventing the education system in Africa using the education that the knowledge, land-based knowledge, relational knowledge. And so I'll be talking a lot about relational knowledge. And my interests are in preserving that relational knowledge, which I look at from the lens of Ubuntu, between us as human beings and the natural land, and what does that really entail, and how does that relate to human intelligence and artificial intelligence, the link between the two. So I'll be talking to you about the right to relate, and the right to relate I also tied to the right to work, but I define work very differently, and I'll be sharing that as I go on. So my topic today is Ubuntu as the philosophy of relationality between natural human intelligence and artificial intelligence. I am the lead researcher for African AI at Inclusive AI Lab. This is at Utrecht University, where I'm based at the Department of Media and Culture, and I'm very happy to be here. So I'll just set the pace with set the stage with context. I had the privilege of recently visiting the Umoja village in northern Kenya in Samburu. These are a group of women that live in one village. And this is part of my work to try and discover or see from a different lens what we stand to lose, or what does it mean to live with artificial intelligence in these marginalized communities. So when I visited this village, something really interesting happened. As usual, in any village in Africa, the women stopped what they were doing. They'd been waiting for me. But they gathered in a circle, and then I said, stepped into the village. They broke into song and dance as if welcoming me back. And one of them actually said, it is as if we're welcoming our daughter who has returned home. Now, and then later that night, they offered me a place to sleep in their manyata, which is this established, home that they live in, which is a room that houses 5 women and 14 children. And they all sleep in the same room together on goat skin spread across the floor. And it was in that offering, I don't know them. I was there as a researcher. I'm there to get to do an interview about their work. And it occurred to me that this is something, that kind of relationship is something that artificial intelligence cannot possibly read. It cannot code that into our systems. So this idea of Ubuntu as an embodied relational intelligence is not an abstract, it's a lived experience where to be human is to be embraced by others. And these are relationships that cannot be predicted because they happen in the moment, even with those who you've just met. So what is the problem with AI's narrow intelligence? So today's artificial intelligence cannot see that relational web, that web of relationships quite in real time in that way. We can see it, we can use the algorithm to see the connections of relationships between people, but we cannot predict when those connections will actually happen. So it cannot also read that warmth of the welcome or the ethics embedded in that act of sharing that space, what that decision to offer me a place in that moment versus something else. Maybe they wouldn't have offered me that. And this is because AI has been trained on fragments of text, on abstractions, and on data stripped from its ecological and cultural context. Artificial intelligence has inherited this Western philosophical lens that values efficiency, binary logic, and individual rationality, while ignoring that deeper relational knowledge that societies like the Umoja village embody. And so this is my argument for why we must turn to Ubuntu as a philosophy of relationality that is starkly different from the Cartesian idea of I think, therefore I am. Ubuntu says I am because of who we are. That relationship is a multiplicity of values that come with each individual and then the relationality behind them. So I look at Ubuntu as the expressive art of being human. And I'm sure we've all heard this saying, Umuntu, Gubuntu, Gabantu, a person is a person through other persons. In my mother tongue, we say Moduniado, which is Kikuyu for the same. A person is a person through others. And I argue that Ubuntu is more than just a moral code. It's what I call clariscopic Ubuntu vision. The ability to see through surface differences into the deeper patterns of connections that hold us together. And I draw the difference between this clarity of vision to what I call a kaleidoscopic vision, which is how I see AI as being designed in the image of its designer. These algorithms which endlessly fragment reality into colorful illusions, but they're illusions nevertheless. Clariscopic Ubuntu sees the whole. It's continuous. It's the shared human connections beneath these shifting forms. And here's where I want to introduce the idea of work and land as part and parcel of the right to relate. Now, in Umoja, work is not divided into isolated tasks. It is relational. As with every other village across Africa, in Umoja, the women bead necklaces together, the children fetch water, the elders tell stories that guide the decisions. There is a logic to how things are done. It is not task-oriented, it is co-created. Work is co-creation, maintaining the conditions for life to flourish, not just for the human, but for also the more than human life, the goats, the cows, everything. And so this is why I argue that the right to work is inseparable from the right to land. Indigenous knowledge is cultivated in place. For example, a healer's wisdom depends on the plants that grow in a specific soil. A potter's craft depends on clay. A storyteller's memory depends on the gatherings. And those gatherings happen in particular moments. They are not predictable. They could happen due to an issue that is ongoing on land. They could happen due to a dispute. So these are unpredictable moments. And so if land is lost or if place is lost, so too is the relational knowledge that emerges from it. So AI might be able to automate tasks, processing data, scheduling logistics, but it can't replace what I call this artisanal intelligence, a different form of AI. And artisanal intelligence is human craftsmanship. And it's not just the doing, the thing that you create. It's the weaving, it's the farming, it's the healing, it's the storytelling. It's repairing relationships. It's the intelligence of relationships that is sustained by dignity, by the principle of reciprocity and care, which are inherent in Ubuntu philosophy. And this is a work that ensures survival, because it's only possible when we are rooted in land, in community, in story, to see those relationships as they emerge. So what are some of the lessons that we can learn from indigenous civilizations? I will share the references in the end, but history has affirmed this truth in many places. In Zimbabwe, there was that method of where artisans, farmers, and traders created not just an economy, but an ecosystem of mutual support where wealth was measured in relationships. And this is still happening in most African communities. Among the Akan, the Noboa, cooperative farming, ensuring that every field was tended in turn because survival depends on mutual labor. So you can't tease out the individual tasks from the co-created work that is relational. And in Umoja today, those women are not just women from Samburu. They're women from other neighboring communities, Samburu, Turkana, Borana, and Rendile, who are actually historically divided by conflict. But by coming together, they weave beadwork together. They embody that principle, the principle that healing and innovation requires interdependence. And these are just a few examples of what I call artisanal intelligence, which is Ubuntu in a nutshell, showing us that flourishing does not come from efficiency alone, which machines can do, but from this art of continuous reciprocity and care for each other. So what can Ubuntu teach us, teach AI? If AI is to serve humanity, then it really needs to learn these three lessons. Moving from data extraction to story keeping, where communities must be engaged as custodians of wisdom, not just as data sets to be mined. How can the women in Umoja be part of creating the data that serves or enhances AI? We must move from task automation to craft augmentation, where AI supports human artisanship, this art of relationality, amplifying creativity rather than replacing it. And then moving from monocultures to pluriversal ecologies. This is where AI design must respect diverse cultural values that are grounded in ethics that are relational, this ethics of relationality and relational accountability, which is a continuous skill. And I have an example of participatory design circles in Namibia where storytelling is already shaping technology. And this illustrates how Ubuntu can guide an inclusive AI development. We can do it differently, and we can do it by creating smaller language models that have this principle embedded in it. So, and that's what I call claroscopic Ubuntu vision, which is asking us to reorient our gaze. Instead of seeing networks as pipelines of information, Ubuntu sees them as ecosystems of care. Instead of valuing tasks alone, this task-oriented mentality, efficiency and designed for efficiency, Ubuntu values work as co-creation with nature. Instead of measuring intelligence by the speed or scale at which we do things, it measures it by the quality of relationships. Can we have a communal flourishing index embedded in our AI systems? And Ubuntu insists that the ultimate work of being human is repairing and maintaining relationships, not only with each other, but with land and with the more than human kin, which are our rivers, mountains, winds, and so on. This is the survival code, the muscle encoded in Ubuntu logic or Ubuntu consciousness. So to conclude, I wanted to conclude with this Akan proverb, which translates to, it's because of others that one becomes human. So we can see that this concept of Ubuntu, while the word itself, of course, is Southern Africa, borrowed from the Bantu-speaking communities, the concept, the logic, the way of being is inherently, is ontologically African. It's the way we see ourselves as relational beings. So it's because of others that one becomes human. The women of Umoja live this truth daily. Their relational intelligence is not an artifact of the past, but it's a guide for the future. They are living in the future world that we're seeking communal spaces, communities that flourish. This is already happening. So if AI is to be part of that future, it must be grounded in this relational ethics of Ubuntu, in a claroscopic vision, in artisanal intelligence, the right to relate. Because what good is intelligence, artificial or human, if it cannot dignify life? And we're talking about the dignity of all of life. So My call to action is to design systems that not only calculate efficiency, how much you did, but actually read the care ethics in relationship, that not only predict, but also participate, that not only extract, but regenerate. As Ubuntu reminds us, I am because we are, or as the women in Umoja say, Medua Ayegak. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Wakani, for this lecture. It was really quite insightful. So, as you are articulating your questions or your comments for this lecture, we'll be moving on to the last lecture for this session.